Mommy, look what I drew. Ivory's voice rang through the quaint kitchen, her 6-year-old hand waving a paper scrawled with jagged scribbles and shapes. She shoved her chair back, its screech a joyful burst, and bounded into the living room. Her mother sat there, a laptop casting a soft glow across her tired face. Ivory thrust the drawing forward, inches from her mother's hazel eyes, her own brown ones wide and sparkling. "Let me see, baby girl." Her mother leaned back, her grin softening her weary features. "Is this us?" She gasped with excitement to match her daughter. "Yeah." Ivory pointed to the stick figures, hands linked. "Me, baby Louisa, you and—" She froze, her finger hovering over the tallest figure, its face a chaotic swirl of violet and black, scribbled white eyes glinting back at them. Silence gripped the room, shadows twisting like ink bleeding across a drenched watercolor. The air thickened as if the house held its breath. The squiggly figure's face pulsed like a heartbeat that seemed to vibrate off the paper. What happened to—" Ivory whispered, her voice quivering, small and frail. The stick figures suddenly collapsed in on themselves and blurred, their lines writing and twisting. Ivory's wide and terrified eyes sought her mother's face for reassurance, but found only a strained, frozen smile, lips that seemed stitched against their will. Her mother's gaze was fixed on their front door, on the other side of the living room. "Here he comes," she said, her voice flat, mechanical, like a rehearsed line. The door creaked open, hinges groaning, and a dense violet haze oozed inside, edges writhing like smoke in a storm, drinking the room's light. The air grew heavy, thick with a sickening, mechanical scent clogging Ivory's throat. Ivory's scream shattered the silence. She spun to her mother, gone, replaced by a swirling, inky vortex, its center pulsing like a black hole tugging at her. She stumbled back, feet catching on the rug, clutching her drawing until the paper crinkled. The stick figures had fully warped into jagged violet clouds, except hers, trembling alone in the page's center. A faint voice called her name, soft, familiar, barely piercing the suffocating drone. "Mommy," Ivory choked, tears streaming down her cheeks. The voice grew closer, weaving through the air like an ungraspable thread. Her legs buckled, and she sank to the floor, sobbing, hands over her ears as the walls bent inward, the house alive, breathing. "Ivory!" Louisa's emphatic shout sliced through, yanking Ivory awake. "No!" she gasped, jolting upright in the back seat, the seatbelt digging into her shoulder. Her heart pounded, each beat a frantic thud. The dream's haze lingered in her mind like smoke after a fire. Her eyes darted around the car, the engine's rumble and the sun's faint glow, through clouds anchoring her. "What's going on?" she mumbled, her throat dry and scratchy. Her mind felt split, still snagged in the dream's fading pull. Her trembling hand found her backpack at her feet, fingers brushing the tin box's hard edges through the canvas, a lifeline tethering her as the car rumbled down the freeway. Louisa squinted, her curly blonde hair spilling from a light gray hoodie she'd thrown on, as if seeking comfort despite her confidence earlier. "You were mumbling weird stuff and like crying." She turned to the window, her brown eyes catching the blur of trees. Ivory touched her cheeks, dry, no tears. "No, I wasn't," she whispered, uncertain, the dream's weight lingering. Kaiki half turned from the front seat, his dark eyes meeting hers briefly, sadder than his morning's forced smiles. Amber stared at passing cars, her eyes glistening before glancing at Kaiki. A hushed murmur passed between them, too low to catch. Ivory's stomach twisted. Despite the countless quiet talks between Kaiki and Amber over the past several months, each one still twisted the knife, filling her with that familiar sick dread of the hard conversations she knew were coming. About Mom's fading days, about what would happen to Louisa and her after, all that crushing uncertainty hanging like a storm cloud they couldn't outrun. Kaiki and Amber had been there from the start, woven into their family like threads in an old frayed blanket. They were old friends of both parents, but their bond with the girl's mother ran deeper. Forged in adventurous days of youth and young adulthood, before life got complicated. To Ivory and Louisa, Kaiki was like a goofy uncle who turned tense hospital drives into pirate adventures, or surprised the girls with takeout when they've had a long day. His determination shining through even when things looked bleak. Amber, with her calm presence and endless patience, has provided a caring nature and a soft counterpoint to the persistent chaos that has been forcefully embedded in their lives. They weren't blood, but they were family all the same. The car's hum softened as they exited the freeway, weaving toward a looming 7-story hospital, its shadow stretching like a warning. Kaiki steered into the underground parking lot, dim fluorescent lights casting long shadows across the gray cement. They parked near glass doors, their white glow stark against the dull lot. Kaiki stared at the cement wall, his voice cracking. "Girls, take as long as you need today." He stepped out, Amber and the girls following, black backpacks slung over their shoulders. They climbed the lot's incline to the sliding glass doors. The cool air was sharp with exhaust and antiseptic. Kaiki and Amber moved ahead, their whispers inaudible, shoulders tense. Amber glanced back, her long brown hair framing her pale face, eyes heavy with concern. The doors hissed open, revealing a hallway to escalators, softly buzzing toward the bustling lobby. The chatter of doctors and visitors filled the air, laced with stale coffee. A flickering light buzzed overhead, and Ivory's skin prickled, the dream's haze stirring in her mind like an unwelcome echo, that suffocating pull tugging at her thoughts once more. At the escalator, Kaiki and Amber stepped on, heads bent in quiet talk, words lost in the hospital's ambiance. Ivory paused, seeing Louisa frozen a few feet back, her eyes glassy, and her usual cheer replaced by trembling vulnerability. "What's wrong?" Ivory asked softly, her dread mirrored in her sister's face. Louisa shook her head, tears spilling. "I don't want to go, Ivory." Her voice cracked, small, fragile, unlike her usual defiance. Ivory's throat tightened, eyes burning. She crossed to Louisa, taking her hand, wiping her cheeks with her hoodie sleeve, the gray fabric damp and darkened. "I know, Lou," she said, pulling her into a tight hug, Louisa's face buried into her sister's shoulder. After a moment, they stepped onto the escalator, hands clasped, its constant hum blending with their uneven breaths. At the top, Kaiki and Amber waited, their worries softening to faint smiles at the sisters' linked hands. The lobby stretched wide, its white floor gleaming under fluorescent lights, thick with hospital bustle. Kaiki muttered, "Wait here," and wove through chatting doctors to the front desk. A young woman frowned as he spoke, his hands fumbling. The young woman turned toward her computer on the desk, and after what seemed like too long, she turned back to Kaiki and had said something to him, at which he nodded and turned back toward the group. "Moved her to the 4th floor," he said as he approached Amber and the girls. His voice was tight. He sighed, then pushed his black-rimmed glasses back against his face. "Let's go." They crossed the lobby, passing a cafe where coffee mingled with disinfectant, and crammed into an elevator with hospital staff, a pastel scrub rainbow, white coats rustling. The 4th floor was quieter, muted beige floors, the air heavy with consistent soft beeps disrupting any silence. A sign read Intensive Care Unit, pointing to the right. Beige doors swung open with a whir, revealing a desk flanked by hallways. A nurse in light purple scrubs grinned, but a nurse in white scrubs with a light brown ponytail emerged, her face lighting up. "May!" Ivory and Louisa cried, rushing to hug her, sneakers squeaking. May squeezed them back, laughing, her warmth anchoring the sterile space. "Ah, missed you two. One sec, okay?" She handed a clipboard to the desk nurse, Sherry, whose smile faded. "I'll take them, Sherry. Check room 406. Sherry nodded and hurried off. May scribbled a note, her smile softening. "Come on, let's see her," she said to the girls as she took Ivory's hand, Louisa grabbing the other, and led them down the hallway on the right. Kaiki and Amber trailed close behind, their steps heavy. Room numbers ticked down, heart monitors beeping faintly. May greeted passers-by warmly, easing the sisters' tension. At room 415, she stopped, her smile faltering as she glanced at Kaiki and Amber. Dr. Young's filling in for Dr. Hoffmeister today. She'll stop by soon. She opened the door and held it as they entered the dim room, then closed it softly. They were greeted by a pale blue privacy curtain which divided the space from the entry. Louisa slipped through, Amber holding it open for Ivory and Kaiki. The room was large, isolated, its silence broken by a heart monitor's beep and a ventilator's steady pump. A frail figure lay in the bed, tubes weaving to her pale form, her dark brown hair fanned across the pillow, a shadow of her vibrant self. Her chest rising and falling rhythmically, perfectly but artificially. Louisa climbed onto the bed, snuggling close, lips brushing her cheek. "Hi, Mommy," she whispered, voice breaking. Ivory sank into a chair on the opposite side of the bed as her sister, backpack at her feet, and took her mother's cool hand, brushing it gently, tears falling freely. Louisa's sniffles joined hers, muffled by the bed. Kaiki and Amber sat on a couch, eyes wet, arms entwined. The room pressed close, thick with unspoken loss, the machine's pulse relentless and steady. A monitor flickered erratically, and Ivory stared at its screen, her sleepless mind playing tricks. She shook it off, gripping her mother's hand tighter. A quick knock broke the silence, and the door creaked open. A woman in a white lab coat entered, closing it behind her. "Hello," she said, her smile kind but careful, dark hair in a neat bun. "I'm Dr. Young, first time meeting you all." She extended a hand to Kaiki, who stood, wiping his eyes. "I'm Kaiki, this is Amber," he said, gesturing. Amber waved faintly, her gaze remaining low, her long brown hair falling over her shoulders. "We're close to the girls, family friends." His voice faltered, nodding at Ivory and Louisa, tears staining their cheeks. "Nice to meet you," Dr. Young said softly, her voice lowering to almost a whisper. "May and Dr. Hoffmeister filled you in on the details about today, right?" Ivory looked away, caressing her mother's hand, fingers trembling. Louisa buried her face deeper. Kaiki and Amber both nodded. "Anyone else coming? Grandparents? Siblings?" Dr. Young asked. "No," Kaiki said, voice strained. "The girl's father?" Dr. Young asked. "No," Ivory snapped, eyes fixed on her mother's hand, voice sharp with pain. Kaiki and Amber exchanged a glance, Amber's hands twisting, knuckles pale. Dr. Young nodded gently. "Take all the time you need. Press the call button when you're ready." She pointed to a red button by Ivory's chair. Ivory flinched, her heart raced, her whole body felt tense. As she shifted in her chair, "Thank you," Kaiki said, and Dr. Young left, the door clicking shut. A sudden look of concern crossed Kaiki's face. He mumbled some words to Amber, then crouched by Ivory. "We need to talk to Dr. Young. We'll be back." Ivory hugged him, then Amber, seeking their warmth. She climbed onto the bed opposite of Louisa, mirroring her sister's embrace of their mother, tears quiet but fierce. Louisa sat up and looked at Kaiki and Amber, then quietly curled back into her mother's side in the bed. The door closed, leaving the sisters' soft sobs and the room's low ambiance. Ivory glanced at the clock. 20 minutes since Kaiki and Amber left. Louisa's soft snores drifted, her face pressed against their mother's arm. Ivory studied her mother's face, her dark hair, once long and full, now thinned out and fading from months of steadily declining health. "You always said we're beautiful, strong, brave," Ivory whispered, tears blurring her vision. I'm not brave, Mommy." Her voice cracked and her lungs felt heavy. She leaned closer, her forehead against her mother's, the ventilator's rhythm distant in her mind. Her eyelids grew heavy, the sleepless night pulling at her, as the soft sounds of the room lulled her. She fought to stay, to hold this moment, but her breathing slowed, drifting towards sleep. Her mother's hand clasped in hers. A crash jolted Ivory awake, heart pounding, visions swimming as she stared desperately out at the room in front of her. The room felt colder, heavier, but she relaxed. A nurse must have dropped something. Louisa still fast asleep, her face peaceful. Ivory reached for her backpack, pulling out the tin box, fingers tracing its cool silver surface, steadying her. Another crash rattled the room, the monitor flickering wildly. She stuffed the tin box back and zipped the backpack, hands trembling. Her eyes locked on the curtain's gap, a shadow flickering beyond. "What's that?" Louisa cried, bolting awake, nearly tumbling off the bed, her hoodie tangled. "I don't know, that's twice now," Ivory said, fear coiling in her chest. She swallowed. "Stay here, I'll check." "Where's Kaiki and Amber?" Louisa stammered, curling against the bed, eyes wide. "They're with the doctor. I'll find them." Ivory crept to the door, a whooshing sound seeping through, like a brewing storm. Her hand shook, gripping the handle. Fear surged, the hospital's sterile air now threatening. "Kaiki, Amber," she called, cracking the door. A cold gust hit her, sharp as a storm's edge. The hallway was dark, fluorescent lights shattered, glass and papers strewn. Both directions faded to black, wind roaring, carrying a faint metallic scent. "May?" Her voice echoed, unanswered, swallowed by the darkness. Panic rose. They were alone, exposed, the hospital now sinister. Louisa's scream pierced the room. Ivory spun, rushing back to find her sister staring at the wall. A thick violet mass swelled, churning, edges writhing like living smoke. The room quaked and the floor continued to tremble as a sudden gravitational tug stole Ivory's breath. "It's real." Louisa fell, hands clawing at her mother's bed. Ivory carefully crawled, seizing her sister's hand, fighting the increasing pull. Their backpacks slid into the dark, demanding wall, vanishing with a whoosh. "No!" Ivory yelled. Furniture began inching toward the demanding wall. The heart monitor teetering, then crashing onto the floor, followed by a loud scrape as it too was pulled in. Small, cloud-like masses suddenly emerged from the wall, similar to the girls in size. They were dense, with scribbled faces, white lines for mouths, dot-like eyes, like childhood drawings come alive. A dozen hovered toward Louisa, ignoring Ivory's screams, and tore her from her grasp, effortlessly and slowly, carrying her back from where they had appeared. "Ivory, help!" Louisa thrashed, legs sinking, voice raw. Ivory crawled, anchoring to the bed's frame, careful not to be pulled in, and grabbed Louisa's hand, pulling, muscles burning. The creatures fled into the void, and Ivory yanked Louisa free, holding her tight, breaths ragged. Thunder rumbled from within, and a massive figure stepped through, human-like in shape, formed of the same mysterious substance, its glowing white eyes fixed on Ivory. It towered, its presence crushing, and lifted their mother, tubes and wires falling, as if suddenly and magically unattached. The rest of the machines crashed onto the floor and disappeared into the wall. "Let her go!" Ivory screamed, voice breaking. Their mother's eyes snapped open, locking onto Ivory's with piercing clarity. "Don't let them take me," her voice echoed, dreamlike, surreal, cutting through the chaos. "Mom," Ivory choked, tears streaming, hands trembling, helpless. The figure vanished into the void with their mother, her words a fading echo. "Mom!" Ivory's voice shattered. The bed shuddered and began sliding slowly toward the wall, as it felt like it was pulling even stronger. Louisa suddenly slipped from Ivory's grasp, her scream fading as she disappeared into the dark mass. "Louisa!" Ivory clung to the bed's thick frame, tears blinding her, but the bed's legs began slowly screeching across the floor. The pull had overwhelmed her as her grip failed and it had swallowed her up. Like thick mist, the darkness blinded her, heavy yet still breathable. Silence pressed in, her body felt weightless, like she was falling through an endless abyss. Ivory struggled to find balance, a surface, anything to latch onto. She clawed through the dark as she continued her fall. She saw what looked like a faint light pulsing below, sharpening and growing, but her eyes fluttered shut, her consciousness slipping until she finally surrendered to the dark embrace.